Hello, welcome. Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good super late at night.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
Hi.
hello. While everyone starts to join, we had a week off. So if you want to put in the chat maybe something fun that happened during our little break, if you attended the summit, you could say what you loved or what you learned at the summit that was really cool. If you didn't attend the summit, just like something that happened maybe, feel free to bring us all up to speed on the cool life updates. Um, I am super excited for today's class. Last cohort, the user journey stuff we did in this class ended up being like one of the things that just like hooked people, and we saw it in capstones over and over again. So I think that you guys are really going to enjoy this session with Moiz. So I will go ahead and introduce him. I'm not seeing any activity in the chat, so you guys need to warm up, okay? Come say hi. Get ready. Um, so Moiz is a designer and developer and data journalist based in New York. He currently works for Mozilla and is a lead product designer for Pocket. But he previously worked at ProPublica, The Intercept, Wikipedia Foundation. So he has a lot of experience in news. And we are excited to have him join us today to talk about product design. So, oh yeah, Canadian Thanksgiving. That sounds super fun, Pearl. I'm looking forward to our upcoming Thanksgiving as well. We celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day over the break in the US. Um, awesome. Okay, so Moiz, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much, all of you. It's so nice to see you all the faces. I'm so excited. Yeah, so we'll be talking. I have like a packed 2 hours. We'll be talking about product design, user journeys, and just sort of like thinking about like, design as a holistic field. And I will share my screen right now and just start off on that. Give me 1 second, sorry. Yeah. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. Awesome. Yeah, so first off, just some ground rules. Yeah, this is pretty interactive. If you have any questions, I actually don't mind if you like just jump in and like unmute and like say something. I would love to respond in time so that it's all in context. Love seeing your faces, and I don't even have to say it. I say this because I feel like everybody is on video. But if you ever have to like go on video mute, it's totally fine. We'll take a 10-minute break in the middle. The little bit about me, just so we have that out of the way. Yeah, worked at Wikimedia, worked at The Intercept, worked at ProPublica, and now I work at Mozilla. And mostly sort of like the roles that I've had, my background is in computer science and design. That's what I studied in school. And really sort of like I've gone back and forth between being a designer, being a developer. Like when I was at The Intercept and at ProPublica, I was really doing a lot of programming, coding too, to like build news experiences, data journalism experiences. Um, now I'm at Mozilla, and actually this is just hot off the presses. I'm actually now part of the Firefox team, and I'm the lead designer for the new tab team. And so, what is new tab? New tab is when you are on Firefox, which is a web browser. When you open a new tab, you see a bunch of things on there. You might see sort of like some shortcuts, a search bar, and then you will see a lot of sort of like stories underneath it. That experience is something that I am now leading design for at Mozilla. And so that's a bit about me. Some of the work that I've done, like some of the journalism work that I wanted to show you. So this is a project that I did, in 2021, which is so far ago now. Like I looked like a child, I think at that time. and this tracked sort of like all the people who were prosecuted under terrorism laws since 9/11, right? So we were sort of like looking at this from 2001 to 2021, and all the folks who were prosecuted under U.S. terrorism laws, and there were close to 1,000 people in there. And this sort of like seemed, like on the surface, it seemed like a very simple sort of like story of that might not have a lot of data, but when you dig into it, actually like has a lot of real data and a lot of real trends that you can see. Like, so sort of like here, you can see people who were being prosecuted, like how their affiliations were changing over time, how like sort of like different so-called terror groups would sort of like have like an ebb and flow in the prosecutions. We also had this like database of people that you can go and look into, and you can see sort of like where they are. You can dig into this data. You could sort of like read their stories, what they had done, how they got prosecuted, where they were right now, were they free? Because some of these folks are also free now, because the charges against them weren't that serious, and a lot of them are still in prison. In sort of like, so the project, like, at ProPublica, I was working during, peak COVID era. And one of the projects that I did sort of was tracking, PPP loans, which was, a very successful project. And you could sort of like search, an entity, you could find out like how much money they took. You could see sort of like where they spent that money. And actually, like, and this sort of like a project, like, even though when I was working on this, I didn't really like grapple with sort of like how important this database would be, because we were doing this in such a sort of like journalistic, like, high wire deadline fashion. But like, PPP loans became an important sort of like thread, an important piece of like sort of like, because people were really trying to figure out like how their organizations were taking loans, and then we're still letting people go maybe sometimes. So for example, like this is a TikTok that somebody made, and this person sort of like, was finding out about her own like, coffee store that she used to work at, and how like, and she was saying that, hey, my coffee store took $91,000 in loans, but actually then like let me go. So like, if people were like able to like find themselves within these like large sets of data, which is really, really like a very nice thing that you can do through data journalism. If you can build something that where like people can like find their own story within this like pile of data. Another project that I did, and this is the last thing I will show, or no, second last thing, is when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. I wanted to like ask this question and had figured out the answer to this question, that okay, what is sort of like the sort of like when do people on the Supreme Court get nominated? Like what age they are at on average, and then when do they retire? And I wanted to sort of like look at this not just for the Supreme Court, but for the entire federal judiciary system. And there was a lot of discussion around this time after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death about this question of age, right? Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was fairly old, and the judges that Trump had appointed were fairly young, and I wanted to sort of like chart how long their possible term could be. And so you could sort of like look at like average retirement ages for all the judges, across the entire, federal judiciary system. And, and by this time, Trump had 237 judicial appointments across the federal judiciary. And many of them were, in their 30s or 40s, or like early 40s. And they would have a long lasting sort of like judicial impact, right? They will be on these courts until like 2040, 2045. and it was kind of like scary to like chart that out. This is the very last project that I will show, and then I will go and get into our like topic of the day. So this was a a project that we did in 2021 in January, sort of like and maybe one of the wildest projects that I've ever worked on. We built this thing in 4 days. It was such a flurry of work, and and we worked like and I was one of the many people who worked on this, and the project sort of like started days after the attack on the Capitol, and when we got like a trove of thousands of videos from Parler users. So Parler is this social media service that folks who went to the Capitol were using to post videos, and then somebody sort of like leaked ProPublica a trove of like terabytes of like video data, looking at all the videos that people had posted on their public Parler accounts, and we thought that wouldn't it be amazing to sort of like show all those videos in a timeline fashion, so you could kind of like see and be in different places around the Capitol and see from like different view like how this event progressed, and where were people, what were they doing, how they were like they proceeded to sort of like go inside of the Capitol and attack the Capitol. And 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 honestly, like we felt like this project obviously like met its goals because it really reached a big audience. And days sort of like after we had published this project, Democratic Congress people were actually using this project as evidence against Trump in the impeachment trials. And this is a little clip that I love, and my parents love too, because it's like this piece of project being shown by Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, in the Senate when she's making her case against Trump, and in this impeachment trial, and this was shown in the Senate, and you can kind of like see the ProPublica URL at the bottom. It's kind of like this like really like interesting little thing. All right, that's enough about me. I'm gonna go like dive into like design stuff. So we're going to talk about what is design. We're going to go dive into sort of like this like very like interesting word design that we use in all kinds of contexts. I'm going to talk about three qualities of good piece of design or a well-designed product. We're going to dive into user journey maps, which is a tool to listen to our to folks who use our products and sort of like document their journey with our products. I'm gonna then cover like how we could run a great design critique session, which is really part of a good design process. And if you have time, we'll dive into like some tips about hiring and managing designers, and then and some space for like Q&A. So let's dive into like design. Like, what is design? So when we all say like the word design, like what do we mean when we talk about design? Like what do we sort of like mean by that word? And really, like when you look into it, like there are like many different types of design, and this is just like an extremely small subset of it that I'm just listing out here, right? And I wanted to like, instead of sort of like defining like immediately what design or what I think design is, I wanted to sort of like list this out and to sort of like show you how expansive this field is. And there's so many different types of design. There's so many subfields that like overlap at times too, right? So for example, like graphic design is really like thinks deeply about how do we communicate visually an idea, right? Visual design is really about sort of like how do we build a cohesive brand. And you could see sort of like how graphic design and visual design, there's a massive overlap in those two fields, right? Same with sort of like something like user interface design, which cares deeply about how a piece of software looks, right? But then user experience design is how a piece of software feels, right? And those two, and then also interaction design is how a piece of software sort of like reacts, how when you use a piece of software, the software reacts to you and how people react to that software, right? And how it's this sort of like, a circular loop, when you're using this like piece of software. And those three fields, so the UI design, UX design, and interaction design are also things that completely overlap. There are other fields too, like sort of speculative design, which is like the last thing, which is a really interesting field in design, that thinks about how like it sort of like thinks about future through the design process, and sort of like thinks about how products could be in like a far future. Like, so think about sort of like some of the technologies that you might see in a science fiction movie, that all is coming out of the field of like speculative design, right? um, Subfields like product design, industrial design are things is sort of like that are very much about physical products, software. Like, product design could also be about sort of like non-physical products, so like software. And product design is sort of like is used within the industry as this like catch-all term to describe sort of like a combination of like UX, UI, and interaction design. And and really, like, when I sort of like look at this list of sort of like all these subfields, and this is just, and I can assure you, this is just a small subset of fields that are within this ginormous umbrella of like what we call design. I feel like how sort of how many different uh, uh, sort of like areas overlap, and also how many different fields and studies sort of like interact with this with design, right? Sort of like how design is very closely related to fields like psychology. It's very closely related to even fields like data science, because data science actually like feeds into design and helps designers make decisions about how do we design better products to like learn about their users, right? Um, and of course, like, not to be all cliche, but sort of like if you're really thinking about a definition of design, I think like this quote about from like Steve Jobs, obviously, like really like puts it in like a good like framing, which is that most people make the mistake of thinking design is what it looks like. It's not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works, right? And I think like this sort of like broader framing of what design is, I think it's very useful, right? And it sort of can sometimes feels pretty expansive, when you're working on a project, that, oh my God, I as a designer, I'm responsible for like how everything works. But it also, in a lot of times, like freeing to like think of a design in this way, uh, and feel like, oh, that you have sort of like some um, license or agency to work on different parts of this product with different uh, folks who might have different expertise, from engineering to data science to editorial, and still feel like that their work directly impacts the design of the product, the sort of like not just how it looks or feels, but really how it works all together. I'm going to dive into like sort of what the three qualities of design are, of good design are, and sort of like this might be like a better way to describe design, because it puts it sort of like in like a more finer point, and gets it to like thinking about specifically how could you break down a good piece of design. And I feel like there are three really important aspects of what makes a good design. And those are likability, usability, and accessibility. And I will break these things down, one by one. So likability is, means like, is it fun to use? Is something fun to use? Is it joyful? Is it attractive? Is it appealing? Does it make you feel good when you use it? Uh, um, it's kind of like, I think one of the best examples that I have, right, is those like kid sneakers that like light up when you like step in them, right? And those are like just immediate sort of like has like this such a high quotient of like likability, right? And usability is concerned about making things easy and intuitive to use. um, and and software that feels sort of like easy and intuitive to use usually feels very natural. It feels something like that you have used before already. It might be new, but it might feel familiar. And usually this happens because these pieces of software or these products are built on top of common design patterns from the past that you might already have absorbed, like just being around in the world and being and like interacting with the things around in the world, right? um, Accessibility, is about making something usable for everyone regardless of their needs, right? And this is an important like part of a good design. And I really want to sort of like emphasize this one because I feel that it doesn't get talked about as much as likability and usability, because I think usually what happens is that like teams might be naive enough to feel that, oh, if they have made something that is likable or usable, they will sort of like fulfill their like user and business goals. But I think accessibility sort of like really takes a product that might be good, might be okay, and and it can make it great, right? And I think that is a sort of like a subfield, a sort of like focus within the design field that is extremely important. And some of the best products are like some of the most accessible too. Um, so these are sort of like the three, good qualities that I feel like, define good design. Now, if you Google sort of like good qualities, like, or like qualities of a good design or a good piece of this design or a well-designed product, you will probably like find like several, things out there, like, listing other sort of areas, right? But I feel like these three, subfields, like areas, are sort like, kind of like nicely, like, describe what a well-designed product could be or could achieve to be. Another way to think about good design, right, is also that everything that you are designing, everything that you are building, everything that you are sort of like thinking about in these terms should be intentional. It should, like, every little decision should be there. There should be an intent behind it. There should be some thought behind why you have made those decisions, right? So, um, when you are thinking about making like a font bold, like thinking about like, why is that font bold, or why did I choose that color, or why did I make something that shape, or why is something big or small, or why did I add a photo here or an image here and not somewhere else, or if you're thinking about like a chart, why did I round the percentages in a chart, or why did I make this chart a bar chart, not a pie chart, why are within this chart like different lines, different colors, for example? Like all those little decisions like need to be intentional. You need to think about it from the user's perspective to really come to a place where you could feel like confident about that piece of design, but also feel like that you have really thought about, like, the actual essential fundamentals of the thing that you're building, right? And one really, really sort of like critical sort of way to like think about these things about in these sort of like very, very, very small details is that when you listen to users talk about, or like people who are using the products that you're building, how they are talking about them, what are their concerns, and what are some of the things that they are finding difficult, with the product. Those things sort of like immediately would like drive you to these like very fine questions, very sort of like deep, like, detailed questions, right? And I think so. I feel like you can only be intentional with design if you also focus on listening to your users, right? And listening to your users is extremely critical in the design process. And um, and I think sort of like, and this is why like I really, really like the next thing that we're going to be talking about, which is building user journey maps. And because it is one of the tools that helps you understand your users, understand sort of like what is their experience, what is their overall journey, with the user, with your product, and sort of like kind of like very like detailed and analytically like figure out, oh, these are the bits that we need to improve to make the lives of our readers, our users better, right, through this product. And I think it's a really like incredibly like sort of like powerful tool, like, in the tool belt of like, product development, across the board. So what are user journey maps, right? And user journey maps sort of like one, so this is a definition. So they are a visual representation or a diagram that illustrates the steps and experiences a user goes through when interacting with a product, service, or a system, right? Now, of course, there's a lot of words here, right? Like I'm going to break this down actually like piece by piece. But first, let me show you sort of like an example of what a user journey map could look like. And this is a very simple example, So here's an example of a user journey map, and I know you can't see all the text probably because it's too small, but I will zoom into it in just a little bit. And this is a very simple user map, user journey map, and it's about sort of like focusing on a journey, somebody's journey, a user's journey around shopping for a new car, right? And there are several different sort of like there are properties of this user journey map that I will break down one by one, right? So for example, these are the components. We have personas, stages, touch points, user actions, emotions and thoughts, pain points, quotes, existing solutions and opportunities. And I will go through it one by one, like from this example, to sort of show you how this example is built using some of these components of a user journey. So what are personas, right? Personas are really like representations of your ideal user. So sort of like think about, in the car buying example that we have, think about, a persona of a user who might be a first-time car buyer. That is a nice, cohesive sort of like, a simple persona that you could imagine what that person's needs or like, problems could be that they would like to solve, because they are a first-time car buyer. And here, like in this example that I was showing, we have a user persona called emotional Eric, right? And this persona sort of like defines a persona of an emotional car buyer. Sort of it also like lays out expectations from that of that user. So the ability to compare cars and their breakdowns. So this person might want that, like might sort of like would like that more than other user personas, from their car buying experience. They would like good photography with close-ups inside and out in this tool, in this car buying tool, for example. They might want video overviews of like the car that they're about to like look at or buy, and I think like setting up a persona sort of like puts you in the mindset of what this user's needs could be, what like and how they could go about the entire journey while they're using your product or your service, right? So and the next thing that we're going to talk about, the next sort of like component is talking about these like stages within this journey, right? And so in this example, here are the stages that are laid out, right? So there is the first stage is called consider, the second stage is explore, the third is compare, fourth is test, and the fifth is negotiate, right? And each of these are sort of like in this car buying journey. So in the consider step, it might be like 1 week for somebody to sort of like consider what kind of car that they want to buy. It might and all of these sort of like are broken out by time periods, by different time periods, and some phases might be longer than other phases, right? So for example, like the sort of like exploration phase is 2 months long, which is the longest phase. And because this is an emotional buyer, they might even take even longer to explore what kind of car options they have, right? The next component is touch points, and this is sort of like thinking about where your product meets the user or the customer, and in this example, sort of like it's laid out very simply, right? So in the consider step, it's just like a mobile device. On Explore, it might be mobile and your laptop. In Compare, it might go to your laptop because comparisons might be harder to view on mobile. When you're testing something and when you're looking at something, you might still be using both your phone and your laptop. And when you're negotiating, this car purchase, you might solely be using a laptop. So this part of it is like very like simply just like laid out here with just like an icon to show where, like, what is the context of the user, what devices they're using, where they are when they are in this phase of the journey, right? Using your product. Another important component is user actions, right? And which is what are the things that they do with your product. So here you can see for each step all the actions that the customer is taking. For example, that he watches a television commercial for your website, for example, which might be like your carnext.net, and might see an ad on Facebook for the same car shopping website, and might sort of like be like considering what kind of car shopping service that the person might want. But for when they're like in the compare phase, they are reading consumer reports, or they are consulting with their friends or folks that they trust about this like car buying decision. And I think each of these steps sort of like could have different parts, different distinct parts of what these like user actions could be, and sort of like laying this out clearly helps the entire product team, the design team, like folks that are working on building this product, sort of like clearly look where the user will be, what they will be doing, and what are some of the other things that they might be doing besides just using your product in that step, right? So for example, like for this car shopping service, reading consumer reports might be something that they're doing completely off that product. They might be doing it, in just like a magazine format on paper, right? But like thinking about that and putting yourself in the customer's shoes, so that you could be like, oh, they might be consuming information from other mediums, could help you make the experience of your product better too. Emotions and thoughts are, sort of like laying out how people might be feeling in each of these steps, right? Pain points, which are very much tied to emotions and thoughts, are actually like I think some of the most impactful and effective parts of a user journey, because you can lay out sort of like what are really like the unsolved pain points that people might have, right? And sort of like quotes could be things that they could be saying, this persona could be saying at that level, right? So emotions and thoughts, pain points, and quotes kind of like go together, in like in a user journey. They sort of like help each other, reinforcing like each other. And in this journey, they have sort of like laid out in this fashion here. And they have, the pain points and thoughts, are all combined in these quotes, and they're all highlighted for each of the steps, right? So in the Explore sort of like section step, they might have a very positive feeling that, oh my God, this car shopping website looks great, right? Or this commercial looks different. But when they are, in this phase, they might be like towards the end where they're like researching, sorry, when they're in the research phase, they might be thinking about, oh, I might miss the perfect car if I don't check sites multiple times a day, for example, right? Which is a pain point, which is this like anxiety giving feeling, right? So like laying all of this out kind of like very nicely and very clearly and very easily like illustrates the entire journey of using a product. Now, user journeys can also add like many other aspects, right? And I'm just listing sort of like a few of those components your team or the product that you're working on might need some other sort of like components too. Some of the components that I sort of like usually include in my user journeys are like also include things like existing solutions. So linking or sort of like capturing in some sort of like an image like existing products that are in the market to sort of like give you a sense of like what are the solutions out there that people might already be familiar with, or that we as a product development team could learn from and could like take ideas from and to could like build on top of. And of course, like opportunities, and these could be like sort of like from a business point of view, like what are the opportunities when you're looking at these pain points or these emotions and thoughts or these user actions where you could sort of like specify which business needs you might be able to address in each of these steps, right? If you like are able to address like a specific pain point in a specific stage of the user journey. So this is just to overview. Really, like a user journey is just like a tool that gives you an opportunity to look much closer to like what your customer's journey looks like across the entire product experience, right? And you really can add sort of like even more like components to it and make it more detailed, make it more sort of customized for your own teams and for your own context. But I think like sort of these components like together could make a really cohesive story that you could like tell and share other stakeholders too within your team, and to like sort of like help them explain too what kinds of user problems that you're trying to solve with the product. So now this is going to be a fun part of it, which is we're going to jump into a group activity, and we're going to have 5 breakout groups. We're going to have 15 minutes each, and I'm going to go in sort of like and describe exactly what we'll be doing in just a minute. And each of the groups will be focusing on one step of the journey, and we'll have a discussion afterwards. So let me just open this sort of like Figma. Actually, I have it opened. Oh, it's open right here. Awesome. So if you look at this, and actually I can see some of you are already in this room. Great.
I dropped it in for you, Moiz.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. So I have this a template of a user journey, a simple user journey that I have laid out here in FigJam, right? And what this user journey is about a casual newsletter reader, right? So this is our persona. It's a very sort of like I sort of like put this together. It's not that detailed of a persona. I've seen personas that might be like multiple pages long, but it just gives you a good snapshot of what the needs of this user might be, where this user might be in their life, right? Because so they're a casual newsletter reader, which is a very like general persona, very wide ranging, and I wanted to keep it wide ranging just so we could all sort of like contribute to this, and we could all sort of like express what we have seen from our experiences with newsletters, across the board in this activity, right? So they might be like somewhere like pretty wide age range. Their goals might be to find newsletters that are like interesting and entertaining. And they might like to have some like light reading during free time. Their behaviors might be that they want to read newsletters sporadically, maybe not like a habitual reader that are reading newsletters every day, that are consuming newsletters every day. They might want to like just engage with the newsletter for like entertainment or relaxation, like just pain points might be that they are bombarded by too much content, too many newsletters, right? And might find it difficult to really find what they want to read, or what they find enjoyable, or what or what aligns with their interests. They're also sort of like they might be easily distracted by so many options out there, right? And they might have a preference for a specific type of content, which might be like shorter newsletters, shorter articles, or quizzes, or fun facts, right? So this is just a persona that I put together, and it's just like a very sort of like basic rudimentary level persona, just to get us sort of like thinking about this type of a user and this type of a persona, so we can like put ourselves in their shoes and see how they would go about their user journey, consuming a newsletter, right? So the stages that I've defined and are discover, consider, sign up, retention and advocacy, and then unsubscribe too, which is a negative sort of like part of the journey. And I've laid out sort of like, and just to give you all a sense, like, discover could be is the stage where they might sort of like be browsing social media. They might be searching on Google. They might be reading an article shared by a friend. So they are like discovering a newsletter for the first time. Their needs might be that they would love to find relevant, valuable, interesting content, to find some like sources that are trustworthy. So I have sort of like put these post-it notes here for user actions and needs, laying these things out. And they're like, and as you can tell, they're very short. They're not detailed. They could be detailed, right? But I'm just like doing this as an example, right? This persona's like emotions and thoughts around the discover phase could be that they're curious about new ideas and information. They are considering if a newsletter might solve or fulfill a problem that they have, or fulfill a need that they have, right? Their pain points might be that they're overwhelmed by choices. There's an information overload. They could also be like skeptic about the quality or the credibility of a newsletter, because there are just so many newsletters out there, right? And they might not know the author of the newsletter. So what I want us to do in these breakout groups is that each of the breakout groups will consider one step of this journey. So you will be assigned one step of the journey, and I want the folks to sort of like take out post-it notes from the FigJam, drag them out, put them out here, and sort of like lay out what they think could be part of the user actions, needs, emotions and thoughts, and pain points for these specific stages of the journey. And just to put yourself in this user's shoes, and to sort of like think about what they must be going through within that phase of the journey. And yeah, so we'll take 15 minutes. We'll break out into groups. And Kyle, they'll be assigned a specific section, right?
Yes, you will see as you go
Awesome.
into your room, the title of your room is the column that you'll be working in. So pay attention to that, so you're not working in one that you shouldn't be. All right, everybody. I'm going to open those rooms now, and I will see you back here in 15 minutes. We'll be here in the main room, and if you have any questions, let us know.
Thank you.
Get us started.
Thank you. Yeah, so we'll be taking just a few minutes to sort of go around each of the groups and look at sort of how you all kind of like illustrated all these sort of like different steps for each of the stages. Is it okay if I go in the order that we have? And I would like the groups to sort of talk about two specific things. So for each of the steps, each of the sections, if you all can mention one or two of the cards that you've put together here. And at the end of it, if you can briefly talk about what you found interesting or difficult as you were laying this out. So could I get somebody from the group that worked on consider to talk about, to unmute and talk about this stage. Anybody?
I can do it,
Thank you.
Heather.
Hi, Heather.
So for consider, I think we had a little bit of difficulty, which I can talk about in the interesting, difficult part.
Yeah, of course.
But some of the things we needed to consider during part one, the user actions, was whether they were reading a single issue that someone forwarded, having conversations with another reader who recommended it, and whether a recommendation came from social media or blogs.
Yeah.
For part two,
For the needs.
Entertainment and relaxation were two big ones that were there.
Yeah.
We needed it to be concise and help them save time searching for info. So that one I think was a little bit easier for us.
Yeah.
As far as emotions and thoughts, we had curiosity and boredom,
Yeah.
which are like, it seems opposite, but they actually go together and distract me. And some of the pain points were just the attention deficit in general. Anything with a big wall of text or complex vocabulary would be probably problematic, and
Yep.
just the amount of content, especially since it seemed to be for the most part agnostic to topic.
Yeah.
So that's what we had there. One thing that I thought was interesting, I don't know if anybody else in the group did, and you can tell me yes or no, was how much this tracked, especially in Consider, with the persona itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it was like relaxation, curiosity, etc. But one of the things I think we had difficulty with was sort of the whole idea that this is a newsletter, but we don't know what the newsletter is
Absolutely.
about for at all. So, because since this is for one specific segment of the newsletter audience, I think that would have, if we had like a little bit more info about what the newsletter was about, we could have considered more.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, Consider actually is a tough stage to think through, because I think Consider and Discover are kind of like they overlap, they they're like in communication with each other, they're like in conversation with each other, and it's a pretty murky sort of like section. And a lot of the times that I see when we are doing user journey exercises at like the teams that I'm in, sometimes there are cards or there are pieces of information that might need to be put on like in the middle of these two sections, right? Because you might have this need when you are in Discover or in Consider, right? And those actually needs, I find they are actually really good things to focus on and to really like address, because they kind of are like showing how like that there's this like overarching there's these like bridging sort of like needs or bridging user actions that are moving people from one stage of the product experience to another stage, right? And they're actually like very like useful stages. They're very useful tasks or needs or pain points that you need to sort of like address. So I really like commend you all because Consider is a tougher section than maybe like other sections here, other stages here that might be more sort of like defined. You might know, like for example, like I think sign up is a more like specific task that is happening. It's a step in a journey that like everybody understands what is happening. But Consider and Discover are more murky. They're more sort of like flexible. But thank you. For sign up, the sign up stage, could somebody unmute and please tell us, like, just go through each of the sections, 1 or 2 cards, and then tell us like what you found interesting or difficult while your group was doing this exercise.
Yeah, so I think that it's funny because I think that we found it to be a little bit murky as well, even though maybe it's not as murky as considering things, because it was hard for us to like jump in the middle of the process and not know how the user had discovered or had already like engaged with the content or engaged with the organization or the newsletter itself. So some of our questions were like, okay, well, we're not sure how did they get here to begin with? But focusing on the sign up process, there's also like parts that were kind of like broad for us. So we're like, well, how do people sign up for something? They put their email in, or they opt in some way. So that's like really that's really like the beginning behavior, as they have opted in or put their email address in somewhere. In terms of the in terms of their needs, we're less going off of like the persona, more so kind of like what everyone kind of needs to sign up for something and have it be as something that is like easy for them to do. So basically that's what we put down is like their needs are that like it's fast, easy, and simple to sign up, to put their email in. There's some amount of like security about like their data and their email, how it's going to be used. And there's some amount of information about like what to expect, like when they're going to get the newsletter, what's going to be in it. And also given their persona, like an awareness of the option to unsubscribe would be a need for them. Yeah.
And their emotions or thoughts?
Kind of like on the one side, we talked about like there are like good emotions where they're like, obviously they're excited, in some way intrigued by this content. There's like some sense of investment and commitment to it because they're putting in their email to get this product. But also like some hesitancy because we know that they don't want too many emails. What if the content isn't what they want? So yeah, those are like the main ones we looked at.
Yeah, no, those are good ones. And the pain points?
Yeah, we had lots of different pain points, that could come up during the process. I think that what we mostly focused on was like the process of like once they've put their email in, given that like that was not a pain point, like actually signing up, it wasn't complex. That there was like complexities afterwards about like confirming the newsletter. Something went to their spam folder. They don't get a confirmation, or they don't get a newsletter soon enough, so they forget that they signed up for it. That kind of thing. And then also like given their persona, there's like, I think it could be a pain point always that they have a lack of control with these things about the cadence, when they're getting it, what content's in there, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so one of the things that you mentioned earlier on, which I'm so glad that you did, because this was like one of the things that I was going to say, is about sort of you were mentioning how jumping into thinking from the persona's point of view, what the actions and the needs and the pain points are within this step, that is kind of like in the middle of the process, in the middle of the journey, not at the beginning. It's kind of tough, right? Because it is very much dependent on sort of like what folks are thinking about here, right? And and how it kind of like makes this point very clear when you're forcing yourself to like do this exercise, how each of these steps are like overlapping a lot. They're in conversation with each other, right? And B, you cannot have teams that are like siloed. And a lot of times you actually find this in like organizations all the time, right? Especially in like, bigger tech companies, right? Where one part of the of the customer journey is with one team, and another part of customer journey is in another team's domain, and they're not in conversation with each other, or there's some like silos there. And I think this exercise kind of makes that point so clearly, that, oh my God, like, of course, like, what I will be thinking about, or what my user actions will be, or what the emotions or thoughts will be, obviously in the sign up step, like depends on like what has already happened, and consider and discover, and what we are laying out here kind of like hands off to like the retention category too. And yeah, so I'm really glad that you sort of like said that little nugget, and it really like helped me like make this point too. Thank you. So for the retention group, could somebody please unmute and talk to us about the actions, needs, emotions, and thoughts, and pain points?
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, hello. No, I just
Hi.
I am a chatty Cathy. I wanted to give someone else a chance. Was that you, Penda? Are you? Okay. We, as you just identified, found a lot of overlap between retention and advocacy. So bringing people in, having them there, and then turning them into evangelists definitely has a lot of overlap. Opening an email, clicking through the content to potentially very different goals, dependent on both, what our email is, and also what our goals for our newsletter are in the current moment. Pretty self-explanatory.
Totally.
In needs, same or similarly, very easy, based directly upon the persona. They tell us that they want simple, easy content, short blurbs that give you more Axios style, as Darla called out, for us to deliver information efficiently. They aren't really invested in long form things inside of a newsletter. And then a differentiation of that content. So they're looking for things that are more entertaining and give them an opportunity to find something that grabs their attention, leading into emotions, surprise and delight, entertaining. Those are, again, highlighted directly from the persona. For pain points, based on the exact opposite of some of those emotions, content that is more news heavy, content that might be more time bound or too timely. Having that evergreen content, or quizzes as they called out, can be really beneficial. Having too many emails, they're not a habitual reader as identified, so we want to make sure that we are just sending them, hey, remember us, or maybe daily is too much, maybe we need to reevaluate some of those. That would be some of our testing.
Anything that you found or the group found sort of difficult or interesting while they were doing these
I think
steps?
it goes back to a lot of our discussions revolved around, is this retention or is this advocacy? So some of the things that we had discussions about were, well, we want them to click through, maybe do we want them to also share? When you're taking a quiz, a part of that is the competitive nature, or the sharing, or the, hey friends, look what friend I am. Is that retention? Is that advocacy?
I think like I was surprised that in the user actions for retention, reading wasn't there. And I think reading, obviously, like I think is a big retention user action. If somebody's not reading the newsletter, I feel like they might, there's a low likelihood they will retain as a user. So I wanted to call that out. I also think sort of like thinking through needs and emotions. I think, and of course, this was a 15-minute exercise, and it was such a short time, right? But thinking through these sort of like portions of the user journey, kind of like sometimes like a lot of the illustrative examples could be really good especially in like needs and emotions sections. Like thinking through specifically, like if you're imagining like somebody in your friends and family circle, like, engaging with a newsletter, like what are the pain points, or what are the needs, or what are the things that they sort of like mention they would like, and like kind of like mentioning that as like a generalized experience, as a generalized example, like in these sections, also is like super helpful in these sections and in a user journey map like this. So I just wanted to like call that out too.
What type of, when you're referencing those, what type of
Sure.
example would you put there?
Yeah. So for example, like in retention, like I think like, I mean, you could expand on both like delight and entertainment and surprise distractions a little bit more, right? You could talk about how, oh my God, on every Wednesday, the newsletter has a surprise crossword, and the topic of that crossword is a surprise every week, and that makes up as a delightful experience that sort of like retains people longer because they like keep coming back to that Wednesday newsletter every week to like open that thing. Like, and I'm just obviously making this example up completely entirely, right? And yeah, but that could be like one nugget that you could like mention here, right? And of course, coming up with an example like this would also be super easy if you were thinking specifically about like one newsletter, right? One specific newsletter, like, and yeah.
I
But yeah,
said
so
it
that's
during our conversation and I'll say it again now, but I
yeah,
think that sometimes I worry about the distinction between creating the user journey and solutioning for the user.
totally.
And to me, without knowing what that product is, I was like, oh, do we just keep this broad in general, or are we supposed to give totally the specific examples? So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, no, and I actually kept this exercise very general, picked a very general persona just so because I wanted everybody to like contribute and like have like a very easy thing to like talk through. But you're right, having specifics, having actual specifics really helps building a user journey, right? Really helps like having specifics about the persona and having specifics about the specific newsletter helps you fill the journey. And actually, a lot of the times what happens is that when you're building out a user journey, there are call outs here that requires you to go and do user research. And you actually realize that, oh my God, we actually don't know what are the actions or what are the user needs or what are the problems that our reader are facing when they are doing specific part of the journey, right? And we need to do some user research here, right? And those are like good call outs. And that actually could be another sort of like swim lane in the user journey map, right? Where you could be like, hey, research needs, like, where you could call out research that you need to do, right? So that's actually like, I'm so glad that we got to talk about this bit too. Yeah. Thank you. Who from the advocacy stage would like to jump in and talk? Anyone?
I can go, I guess.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so for advocacy, we assumed that meant like just like telling others about the newsletter and kind of becoming like a brand ambassador, like being on the team for the newsletter and telling other people it's great and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that's our two things here. Basically, we want them to tell people about it, and we want them to share content, hopefully in a way that will have some kind of branding on it that will lead them back to the podcast or not the podcast, the newsletter.
Yep.
Cool. So for needs, you just want to you want to appear knowledgeable, you want to seem cool, you want to tell your friends something good, you want to tell them about interesting things. We didn't put this in, but just things that make you feel good. You want to just share them with other people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of emotions and thoughts. Same thing. You want to feel rewarded for sharing interesting stuff, or the satisfaction of sharing it. You want to feel like you're part of a community, and the content needs to be special enough that it kind of puts you over that hump, that you want to take action in a way that lets other people know about it. And for the pain points, people are overwhelmed. There's too much stuff to look at. Obviously, everybody said that. Pain point. Sorry. Okay. Another pain point is if you share it over word of mouth, how do people find their way back
Yep.
to the newsletter. And the real one is that like email is not a great way to share content in a kind of way that's going to get people engaged and realize where it's coming from. I feel like we want ways to share things in a way that's kind of branded. The
Yeah.
example I gave is I use a podcast app called Overcast,
Yeah.
and it allows you to clip a chunk of a podcast, like an audio bit, but it'll turn it into a little video that you can share online in a different format in any different social media venue that will also have some branding for Overcast on it. So like the
Yeah.
ability to get out to other places, but let people know where it's coming from, it seems like a real hard thing to do.
Yeah. Anything that your group found interesting or harder to figure out when you were going through the advocacy stage?
I think that just finding a dynamic way to share it that
Yeah.
would lead people getting back to understand where it's coming from, not that it's just like something I wrote in an email. Like how do you
Totally.
get people to know it's part of a larger cool thing that people
Yeah.
like?
Yeah. So a couple of points that I wanted to make on advocacy. I think one of the things that you reminded me of, Frank, was that how, I mean, I mentioned that these sort of like notes could be cross stages, but they could also be cross sort of like stages here, right? So for example, like if you look at your needs and thoughts and emotions, right, or your needs and user actions, there could be things that sort of like overlap in those
Definitely.
two sections. So you could put it like in the middle of the section, and that happens all the time. These things like bleed into each other. The other thing I was going to say was so much of sort of like advocacy, obviously, stage, right, is about community building. And I think a lot of the stuff that you were mentioning here like gets into that community part of the newsletter, right? And I think and sort of like thinking about that of that in that way, like in a lot of ways, like advocacy sort of like is a stage that happens for a lot of the products, right? And really what that stage is about thinking about the product through a community lens. Like the people that are using this product are a community onto themselves, and they should feel like one, and they should feel like that it's a good, positive community, and they could sort of like, and that they would like somebody else to join this community too, right? Which is obviously like the thing that we're trying to do here with like advocacy stage. But yeah, I just wanted to like make that little like point. I would love to jump to the unsubscribe section, and if anybody wants to, please unmute and dive us into it. And like, and I feel like, and honestly, I think unsubscribe is the most fun stage to think through, because I feel like we've all gone through that stage ourselves. We have strong feelings about that stage. So I would love to like hear more about it. Who wants to chime in?
I guess I can go, but please feel free to jump
Thank you.
in if I'm not, if I'm saying something that you think is wrong. But yeah, like you said, unsubscribe, everyone got into the breakout room and was like, perfect, we know exactly what to put down here. But I think to answer your second question first, the big challenge was like, are we talking largely about like why they're unsubscribing? Because like you mentioned, it does rely on like we were talking about, their needs aren't being met. That's the main reason they're unsubscribing. But does that belong here, or does that belong in setting the right expectations in the consider, discover phase, or even sign up stage? But a lot of our stuff is quite granular. So like the actions people are taking are finding the unsubscribe button, like logging into their preference center and managing those preferences through their account, literally clicking unsubscribe. And then also some higher level stuff like decluttering the inbox. And that's what might be triggering this. In terms of, I believe this section is needs.
Needs, yeah.
So this is very much like, this is the part where a lot of the discussion came from. Like, do things like I have too many emails. does that belong in Discover or here? And actually, Valerie pointed out that a lot of the stuff that we're putting down here is exactly the opposite of what was in the Discover stage. So it's a lot of like being time poor, having just too much to read, needing an easy way to unsubscribe, also like feeling frustrated, getting their negative emotions out through that feedback form. And that ties into thoughts and emotions here, where these quotes kind of get at like mismatched expectations, where you're like, oh my God, this isn't what I signed up for. And I have so many emails that I feel like it's so cluttered, it's giving me stress, I'm falling behind because there's so much that I haven't read. Especially if you're doing it in your free time, you're like, whoa, there's so much. And then lastly, in terms of pain points, this got really granular because we talked about how there are often dark patterns that prevent people from unsubscribing. Because of course, as a business, you don't want your readers to unsubscribe. So sometimes you click unsubscribe, but it sends you to a preference center, or you unsubscribe from one type of newsletter, but you're still getting some other type of email that you didn't realize you opted into, and you have to then unsubscribe from that. So that's what this section is about.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so like glad that you all have fun like going through unsubscribe, because I think like if I was doing this user journey, like I would find this section fun too. And you brought up such an important point about sort of like having this insight that actually the user actions are sort of like, or the needs are completely this like opposite mirror of where they were in Discover. And sort of like using that as a jump off point to build the unsubscribe needs. I thought that was a really, really good insight. The other thing sort of that is kind of interesting to me, and I wanted to make this point for the unsubscribe section, is that so unsubscribe obviously is this like negative stage in this user journey. Like product teams don't want users to like go through that stage, right? And I think and I've seen this far too many times where people, because it's a negative stage, they don't consider it part of the user journey, and they sort of like miss that part of the journey when they are working on a product, and they miss the point that oh, if we make that stage of the journey also delightful and also something that is thought through and like and thoughtful, that leaving sort of like a positive like experience for that stage could actually help us with getting people back into the funnel and getting people to sort of like come back, retain, and advocate for the product again. And I think like, and that's why I feel like so many of the unsubscribe user feature, like product features and journeys in different products that you probably use are really poorly designed, really really like crummy to use. They're really painful experiences, and I think it like negatively impacts in like other stages of the journey too. Yeah. Emily, you have your hand on, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So
Yeah.
when we talk about like we included like unsubscribe in this journey, but we didn't really include like the part of the journey where the user is interacting with the newsletter, where they're consuming the content. Is there a reason like why we left that off? And like and also like a bigger question is like, how did you determine like the journey stage is that to put on the map?
Yeah. So sorry, and I saw your question in the break, and I wanted to answer that question that how did I sort of like come up with the journey stages? And the answer really is that this is a very sort of like truncated like journey, a journey, and I hope like working on this sort of like is making this point clear that this journey could have been like 14 steps longer, right? It could be a lot more detailed, right? And I actually picked these 5 or these sort of like 6 stages, just as this like general stages that I thought were like important things that we could talk about and important breakpoints. But in between like sign up and retention, there are several steps that I did not include that I feel like we could include, right? Like there are steps between sign up and retention that are things like like I feel like after signing up, realizing that, oh, like signing up gives me an additional tier of newsletter or whatever that is really good for me, for example, that could be a step that happens between sign up and retention, right? It is in that middle phase, right? And I think we could have another stage for that. And honestly, like these stages are not set in stone in any way, and every product will have different stages. In fact, what happens actually, that depending on your team and depending on where you're working or what product you're trying to solve or trying to build, you might only be focusing on a specific like section, a specific stage here, but you could break down the sign up stage into like 7 different like sub stages, right? And you could really like dig into that part of it. So yeah, I really wanted to like mention that this is just something that I sort of like put together as a very generalized like stages, but it could be as detailed as you can make it. And sometimes sort of like capturing those details really makes it clear what kinds of sort of like needs and emotions that sort of like the product is like missing, because it's sort of like in the gap of these bigger stages, right? And you're not addressing it. Yeah, so yeah, thank you for like bringing that up. Okay, so we are I think we're in a good place where we could go into our next section of the slides. Let me just share my screen one more time. And oh, here's an example that I wanted to show you. So there's a user journey example that I have linked in the slides here. And actually, so this is a tool called They Do. You can find this at theydo.com. They have a free version, they have a premium version. There's a freemium model there. You can sign up. The free version gets you like to use this, but this is a tool to build very detailed user journeys. And as you can tell, so this is an example user journey that I'm showing here about sort of like shopping at I'm at a supermarket, right? Very general, like simple, like journey. But for each of these, and you can see sort of like all the like stages that they have and the way that they've set up stages too. So like I enter, I shop, I pay, I leave. So this is like the phases, and then they have steps. I enter the store, I get the trolley, I get the item off the shelf, I get to the fresh counter, etc., etc., etc. Right? And the interesting thing about this tool is that because this tool is like very much about building user journeys, it has a lot of features. So you could like tap on a car. So this is so they have an insights lane for in their user journey, and in there they have sort of like a section like this that you can tap and you can sort of like see information if it loads up. I hope it does. No, I'm surprised that it's not loading up. Wonder why. Let me just refresh this. Sorry about that. Yeah, so you can see sort of like you can set up sort of like that where that insight is. So, oh, this is only an assumption, right? And you can actually have insights that are not assumptions, that are actually like borne out in research now. So you can like change the status of it, for example. Or you could have sort of like they have a solutions swim lane here, and they have an opportunity lane, and then here sort of like this thing where like improve speed or reduce waiting times, and you can kind of like see that there's some sort of like team discussion around like, hey, what kind of value this provides us, what group is focusing on it, is the status of this sort of like opportunity still open, like it's still like open for us to like work on, or is it something that we've already like tackled and we don't want to come back to, etc., right? And you can have sort of like a description and a lot of details here. This tool is pretty like comprehensive. And I just wanted to like share that as an example of the tool, that there's this whole sort of like world out there that really sort of like thinks deeply about this specific way of thinking about user journeys. Okay, so wanted to show that. I'm going to dive into sort of like, so these examples are in the slides. You can click into them. The next thing I wanted to dive into was sort of like running the design critique session, and then I'm going to actually skip the hiring and managing session, and you can read it through, and then we'll dive into Q&A just because we're running out of time. So I think I wanted to talk about the design critique sessions because I feel like they are an extremely important part of the design process. And I think as a product-led organization, as a team with like where you're trying to build a product, build a good product, having sort of like great, productive, effective design critiques could really help sort of like the team like think through some of the complex, gnarly, like things that are in the weeds, and also come together as a team to like build sort of like confidence around that, oh, what we are building is actually the right like solution or the right idea or the right sort of like problem to like figure out. Now I have a couple of tips that I have as a design critiques, only because design critiques are usually sort of like a very common part of the design culture, but a lot of the times like those things are like not sort of like they're not common in a lot of organizations. A lot of organizations sort of like don't format the design critiques as thoughtfully as they can, and I wanted to like lay out some of the tips here, right? So number one, start with the problem that the project is trying to solve, and what areas the feedback should be on, right? So when you have a group of people together looking at a piece of design, a piece of mock-up, or a piece of sort of like a thing that we are considering as like something to like build, starting from like what is the problems of the project that we're trying to solve, and where the team wants feedback on should be like one of the first things that we should cover in this critique session, right? Then going one by one and asking everyone for feedback is a good way to sort of like make sure to like invite everybody and get everybody to sort of like give feedback and contribute. A lot of the times I feel like only the louder voices get to say whatever they want to say, and we kind of like fail to like hear like other folks. And I think so going one by one and giving everybody like a designated sort of like a minute or two to sort of like speak up, can like, it's a very simple way to sort of like avoid that issue. Also asking people to sort of like break their critique or their thoughts about sort of like, what you like. If you have a question, what do you have a question about? And what suggestions or collaborations might help with this problem or with this specific part of the project, right? I think these are very simple like tips and ideas, but I feel like just like keeping it like on top of your mind, like just to have it there kind of like eases, like simplifies like what everybody is supposed to say about something, or what or how should they frame their thoughts and emotions about something, in this nice framework. And then of course, like throughout, your goal is to like empower the team by encouraging them to like to collaborate further, to build confidence within themselves, right? That's really like the primary goal of the design critique session. It's not really to sort of like tear down like a piece of design. It's really to like figure out what are the gaps in collaboration, what are the like, how can we build confidence in the thing that we are making, right? And I feel like just like letting your team know that you believe in them, and have like faith in their experience and in their like abilities, like goes a long way in that, right? So now what are some of the things that can completely go wrong in a design critique session, right? And there are lots of things that can, and there's a few things that I've like laid out here. So for example, like lack of focus, right? I've seen this a lot of times where like things completely get sidetracked in the discussion. And I think coming back to sort of like those three questions, like what you like, what your questions are, and what suggestions or collaborations you could provide, like those things could like bring back people to like focus on the actual problem at hand that we are discussing, right? And a lot of times people get bogged down by like sort of like irrelevant details or their personal preferences that, oh, I don't like the color red here, and I don't like red because I don't like red, like, you know, and it like comes down to that. And I think sort of like peeling that back and like getting them like, you know, to like frame these things in those formats, like what do you like, what do you have a question about, and what do you have suggestions or collaboration ideas around, like could like unravel some of that. Overemphasis on aesthetics, like a lot of people like design, like, you know, we're looking at design, so it's all about like how it looks, and I think that's such a wrong way to like look at or think about design, right? I hope I've like made that point like, you know, somewhat clear today, you know. And aesthetics are easy to comment on, but they're usually not the problem, and they're usually not the problem that you that are hard to solve, right? The harder to solve problems are actually something that is like not aesthetics. Like aesthetics are like easier to change a lot most of the times, I think. Ignoring user needs, of course, like don't like making assumptions about user behaviors or ignoring user feedback is something that happens all the time. So always like bringing back to like your persona, the needs, you know, having like the journey laid out to like figure out that, oh, we are talking about this part of the journey, and here are the emotions and thoughts, you know, that we can refer back to, I think is like could like tie the critique back to this tool of user journeys. Failure to prioritize feedback, because like, you know, not all feedback is important or feasible, right? Given the sort of like scope of the problem or the constraints of the resources that you are probably like tackling with, right? So like helping prioritize some of that, hey, okay, cool, this and this we can do and we have control over, but these last 3 points we can't really do that right now, and it's not really in the scope. I think bringing that up as a team is also like, you know, clarifies that. So unconstructive criticism is also something that like happens all the time, and like focusing on like suggesting solutions, like in addition to identifying problems is a really good way to like think about getting around like unconstructive criticisms. That, hey, if you are pointing out a problem, think about it, like tell us like what are the kinds of solutions that you could imagine. And sometimes thinking about solutions could come easy, but sometimes they could be difficult, right? Because these are complicated things that you need to be like build like expertise around. But sometimes just like forcing yourself to like brainstorm solutions could also be very helpful. I also have a section around like critiques around like pitfalls of like group dynamics. And I would love you to all to like just go and read through. It's about miscommunication and dominant personalities within a group, and how to sort of like you know, tackle that. You know, getting around groupthink, like, you know, going around sort of like personal bias, like, you know, not bringing in a lot of personal bias around a project or around like people that you are working with, and also like lack of follow-up around you know, what the feedback was and how you need to follow up, what the next steps are after the feedback or after the design critique session. I think those are the things that also like you know, could like, you know, avoiding them could really help. Anyways, I have a link here that is a good sort of like guide to design critiques. Please check it out. I have other resources here too that I've listed that you can all check out as a link. I wanted to like go through like I have some book recommendations here in the slide deck. There's a book about design research that is really, really great. This is a book about interaction design. Don Norman's book is like almost like this like Bible of like thinking about psychology and design. There are other books you know, here that I really love that you should go check out if you have you know, a close by library. Yeah, anyways, I wanted to like, we have 7 minutes. I wanted to like open up for Q&A, and if that's okay. Am I doing okay for time?
Yeah, you're good. Let's do some Q&A.
Thank you. How did you all feel about the session overall? What was the part that you felt you could have like gotten like some more details that or that I've like missed some sort of like areas that I was talking about, because I feel like I covered a lot. Yeah, Oriol.
Hi, so my question is maybe actually one of the sections I could have seen more elaborate, and it was the early examples that you showed. Some of them look very cool. So I did share one of them. You did mention that it was just a matter of days. I think it was the third example, but I was wondering how long it took to develop the other two, because also they look like they were working in a large amount of data. So I was just wondering how much time did you take to develop those? And my colleague asked also for like the return on investment of that, and how you get buy-in to like dedicate all that amount of time into something. Is that easy, or did you find any challenges on that?
So the first question is easy, second question is hard. First question, so for example, like the PPP database project was 5 weeks of work, I think. It was also like fairly quick. We were running, obviously, like it was a crazy like time, COVID, and yeah, the trial and terror database that we built, that was actually a lot of research went into that. There was a long research period. There was a lot of reporting that happened. And I was part of that reporting process, and that took sort of like we were working like from end to end for like 5 months on that. Maybe not completely full time 5 months, but like sort of like it was ongoing for like 5 months as a project. So it was a long, big project. It was a big effort along across the Intercept newsroom. Now you asked about the return on investment, right? And I think so. In journalism, like I think answering return on investment like answer is tougher, because you sort of like sometimes you cannot predict what will come out of a project, or what that project will lead to, right? And how, so for example, the PPP database that we built for ProPublica, right, led to several stories. I'm talking maybe like dozens of stories after the database was published, where people reached out and they were using the PPP database to find themselves in the database, or find their stories, or find their community stories within that database. And they reached out to ProPublica with tips, with stories, that ProPublica then sort of like several reporters, ended up, reporting on, and it became this like ongoing sort of like reporting effort, right? And because people were finding, I mean, this was a ginormous database, and people were finding sort of like fraud and abuse within that database that we couldn't find. We didn't know the stories, right? We were just seeing like raw numbers, and we didn't really know like the deep stories about those things. So people reached out to us being like, oh my God, I saw this number. This is completely like, like out of the like whack. Like it's like we need to sort of like and I know this thing, and I can tell you more about this. So the return on investment was incredible, I think. I mean, right? And I think so the like ROI question is tough to answer. You just almost cannot predict, and sometimes like the way that I think about this is thinking about sort of like, when you're thinking about ideas about how to build a project, or how to design a project, or what the project should look like, think about sort of like the ROI to be on like an extremely positive end of the scale, to be like, oh my God, if you could do this, this, and this, and this, the return here, this could lead us to do this, this, and this, or get this, this, and this place. And that could be incredible, and show that vision in some sort of like capacity to the team, so that you could get some buy-in, right? And but when you're in the middle of the project, and when you are sort of like building it, kind of like scaling back some of those ambitions, and thinking about the compromises, and then evaluating which of those things are actually like should be at the top of or feature list that could help you gain the best return on a project, right? Like sort of like evaluating features by that is also a really, really important process to like go through. And I think in a newsroom especially, like you're just running on such tight deadlines that you don't get to like think through those frameworks. But I think thinking about those frameworks like really helps and really helps you make like clearer, more confident decisions on when you're like making like compromises. Sorry. Any other questions? I'm sorry I like took that long to like answer that one.
Thank you, Moiz. We're about at time. This was a great session. Obviously, we packed a lot in, and I think the exercise was really awesome. Y'all did a great job on that, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to see you all tomorrow at our peer circle. It's going to be low key. You're going to have an opportunity to chat with each other about your capstones and connect. You don't have any assignments leading into peer circle. We will share the feedback survey for this week at the end of the peer circle so that you can give us feedback on both. And we'll see you on Slack. Thank you again, Moiz, for such a great class.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.